Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Right. Give the people that are on time another minute or so to get into the meeting, and then we'll get going.
Sounds good.
Just going to take a picture so I know who's who afterwards, because I don't know any of the faces. Hope people
That's a
will-
great idea. I never think to do that.
Thank you. It's just
Okay, we're going to get started at 5 o'clock. My name is Kara Schroeder. I'm the Education Coordinator for Green Mountain Conservation Group. And I'm really pleased to see the great turnout tonight for the meeting. The meeting agenda, hopefully you all received via email. We're going to start out with a brief introduction. If each person could just say who they are and what town they're from, maybe what organization you represent, that would be great. So just keep it nice and short. I'll call out a name and then we can go right down the list here. Just want to make sure we all know who everyone else is in this meeting. And thank you so much for coming out tonight.
Yeah, I'll just jump in, Tara, and join you and welcoming everyone and thanking everyone for being here. I'm Hal, Executive Director of Gmcg.
And so as we go along through the meeting, just one quick note, if you do have a question or something that we don't get to in the meeting, because we only have one short hour and lots of folks participating tonight, feel free to enter it in the chat feature. EB, who is our AmeriCorps Education Outreach member this year, give a little wave, EB, if you're on there. There she is. She's going to be taking minutes, so we will distribute the minutes afterwards, and if there's anything we don't get to, we'll try and address it after the meeting. Okay, so hang on, I got something else to admit here. All right, so we can start out with BB. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Sure.
Go ahead and unmute yourself.
sure. I think, am I unmuted? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm BB Wright. I represent the Long Sands Road Association here in Center Ossipee.
All right. All right, the next person on my list is Matt. You already went, Matt. Do you have anything else you want to add?
That's good for me. Thank you.
Okay, then Karen Vitek.
Hi, I'm Karen Vitek. I volunteer at Green Mountain with rivers this year and stream crossings. How could I forget?
How can you forget that?
I can't forget that. Whole new vocabulary.
All right, the next person is Tom Gross.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for being here to all of you. And thank you, Tara and Matt. Saco Headwaters Alliance, I'm the president, and our mission kind of overlaps a bit with your mission.
All right, thanks, Tom. Ann Cunningham.
Hi, I'm Ann Cunningham. I'm the chair of the Freedom Planning Board.
All right. And let's see, hang on, my list changed. Here we go, Dana.
I'm the Ossipee representative at Green Mountain.
Okay, and then Jean.
Jean Marshall. Jean Marshall.
Okay,
Okay, from Freedom.
from Freedom. Okay, great. Thank you, Jean.
Representative. I'm a planner by profession, but I am the representative for Freedom on the Lakes Region Planning Commission.
Okay. Just making some notes here. All right, then I have Kamal.
Kamal Nath from Effingham Conservation Commission.
And Marco.
Hi, Mark Longley. I'm the Sandwich representative for Green Mountain Conservation Group. And I'm also representing the Sandwich Climate Action Coalition.
All right, thanks, Mark. Paul, Eli?
Thanks for hosting, Tara. My name is Paul Eli, Freedom Conservation and Freedom Planning Board.
Great. All right. And then I have Roberta McCarthy.
I on the Berry Bay Lake Association president, and also on the board of the Ossipee Lake Alliance.
All right. Thank you, Roberta. Okay, then I have Bob Newton.
Bob Newton, I'm a groundwater hydrologist and have a summer home in Madison.
Okay, let's see. Susan Mark?
Hi, I live in Freedom on Berry Bay of Ossipee Lake, and I am a director of the Ossipee Lake Alliance.
Great, welcome. And let's see, Amanda.
Unmute myself. I actually look better with my image. I'm in a different place with a different camera, so I'll spare you that. So I'm Amanda Stone with UNH Cooperative Extension. I'm the state specialist for natural resources and land conservation, and I'm just sort of in a sort of observational listening mode tonight.
Thank you for being here, Amanda. All right, Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori Dunn, and I'm the Effingham rep on Green Mountain Conservation Commission Board, and I'm also the president of the Province Lake Association, and I have Mark Hempton here with me.
Hi, I'm Mark Hempton. I sit on the Effingham Planning Board.
Wonderful. And Noreen.
Hi, I'm a volunteer with Green Mountain on the Rivers program, and I'm the Madison rep on the Green Mountain board.
Noreen. And EB.
Sorry, I had a lot of things going on my computer screen. I'm EB. I am an AmeriCorps member with Gmcg this year. I'm the Education and Outreach Assistant, and I'm living in Effingham for the year.
Okay, and Trent. Thanks, EB.
Hi, I'm Trent. I'm the AmeriCorps Water Quality Resources Assistant this year with Green Mountain Conservation Group.
Great. Did I miss anybody? Cherry.
Yes, Sherry, I'm a realtor with Costantino Real Estate, and I apologize, my camera does not work.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you for joining us. Okay, we have a really great group of folks, lots of expertise in the room, like I said. I'm going to quickly just pull up a few things on my screen so we know a little bit of background about the Ossipee Aquifer Advisory Committee. So allow me a moment to share my screen here.
Oops.
Okay, so can everyone see my screen here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so just some background about this advisory committee. I like to refresh folks' memory, and if folks are new to this committee, what we're all about. The mission of the OAAC is to raise public awareness and assist communities with regional aquifer protection. And our objectives are to work in an advisory capacity with local municipalities, agencies, boards, and commissions within our watershed to educate the public, to assist in awareness about the Ossipee Aquifer, and to review, gather data, and communicate any potential impact on the Ossipee Aquifer from development. Okay, so that's our background, our mission. This is right off of our website. And I wanted to share with you, here, I'll just pull up the map while I'm speaking here. I wanted to share with you some of the initiatives that we've been working on this year, and then we'll move into some open discussion about our natural resource planning and water resources planning workshop that we'll be collaborating with Amanda Stone on in January, and see if we can't come up with some priorities for that workshop that would be helpful for your town or your organization. So this year, Green Mountain Conservation Group and members of the OAAC and some of these volunteers at this meeting have been involved in some educational programs and outreach. We've worked with 3 different schools this year and 2 towns to do public workshops on drinking water education. More recently, we worked with the town of Tamworth and the Cook Memorial Library in Tamworth to do a program on drinking water education, drinking water protection. And through that program, which was about 2 weeks ago, we tested 36 people's wells for 6 different parameters. And 5 folks that attended that meeting ended up submitting a number of different tests or samples to the state lab. So overall, really successful effort to get information to folks, including information about the groundwater studies that we've collaborated with Smith College and Dr. Newton on. So really great to see that kind of turnout for a Zoom meeting at any point in time, but also to have folks take action to find out if their drinking water is safe and learn more about it. We now are in possession, thanks to Mark Longley, of 50 well kits from DES, 50 standard well analysis kits, and also some additional kits for testing for VOCs and radon. So if you and your town know folks that are interested in getting their well water tested, they can reach out to us for a kit. And at some point, we will be headed down to Concord again, so we can even offer, depending on when that happens, a ride for their samples to get to the lab. So thank you, Mark, for your help with that recently with the Tamworth samples. So for the Get Wet program, which stands for Groundwater Education through Water Evaluation and Testing in Schools in 2021, it's going to be a little challenging. It'll be a little different format this year with all the training and testing being done in a slightly different way due to the pandemic. So we're going to be recording a number of different videos, including Bob Newton has agreed to do some groundwater model demonstrations and videos for us. Thank you, Bob. I'll reach out to you soon about collaborating on that. And we will be trying to get this program online for this year despite the challenges. Just wanted to update folks on that. We have a number of videos on our YouTube channel right now that are related to drinking water protection, including ensuring, I forget the full name of our program, Bob, but ensuring drinking water safety in the Ossipee Watershed is on there. And then the most recent one with Tamworth is on there. And we'll be adding those other videos for schools and homeschoolers on the YouTube channel as well. So we'll keep you posted and let you know when those videos go up. And so I just wanted to ask before we move on to our next topic of discussion, if anyone has any other ideas for drinking water education for this coming year and beyond. If there are programs that you know of, or you can think of ways to get important drinking water education to municipal officials or the general public or our school children, please go ahead and take a moment to unmute yourself, and you can just share or type it into the chat feature as well. All right, it sounds like, I don't know if anyone's written in the chat feature, because I don't know if I can pull it up. Hang on just a second. Anything in the chat feature, anybody? I don't think I can see it while I'm screen sharing.
Nothing yet, Tara.
Yes, I can. Okay, so let's just move on then. Oh, and I just had someone join us. Okay, so let's move on. And I can always pick the brains of the education committee folks on that question as well. I just wanted to offer that out there in case folks had an idea for something that would be useful in their The next thing on our agenda tonight is to talk about water resources and natural resource planning and protection during COVID times. And I've heard, unofficial reports from folks around the watershed about the increase in development that we're seeing. Just this morning, I think Mark, you mentioned there's 50 new houses going up in Sandwich, and I don't know what it's like in a normal year, but certainly that seems to be a pattern that we're seeing across the watershed at this time with all of these, pandemic refugees kind of moving up to our area. And natural resource planning, I think, is something that we're ripe for again in the watershed. The last time Gmcg did some outreach about this was back in 2001. And that was through the Society for Protection of New Hampshire Forests and again, collaborating with UNH Cooperative Extension. We're trying to work with Amanda Stone from UNH Cooperative Extension at this time to design a program, a workshop for mid-January, or actually now we're talking about late January, to share how towns can update and utilize the Ossipee Watershed Natural Resource Planning Guide, natural resource inventories, and other resources such as the Master Plan and Natural Resource Chapter to protect important resources in their town with current and future development that is projected for the region. So I'd like to take this opportunity to give folks a chance to share any concerns, any suggestions for what you would like to see covered in this workshop or future workshops. It might be a two-part workshop depending on what the needs are. So I'll open it up for discussion at this time. And Amanda will be taking notes and we'll also be taking notes.
Tara, excuse me, it's BB. Can we get the screen back that shows all of us so we know?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
There, how's that look?
Yeah, except I have to ask Bob Newton, how come it's dark here and it's light where you are and we can see the lake? Is it a mural?
No, it's a photograph that I turned into a virtual background.
Oh, it's wonderful.
We can all remember what summer was like.
Exactly. Thank you. We need that.
So just to start the discussion, I have heard from folks that wetlands maps, build out analysis for towns would be helpful at this time. Updating things like the report card that we did back in 2001 to show how natural resources, the level of protection across the watershed might be helpful, or just even an introduction to the guide and what's available through this guide for towns to utilize as they plan for future development. But anything else folks would like to add would be great.
In light of the fact that a lot of, we heard this summer with the drought, a lot of wells were going dry. Is there information on like a saturation point for the watershed for, how much water is being pumped out of the aquifer? Like, is there a maximum sort of limit? It's because as more development goes in, every time there's a housing development, everybody puts in a well, what does that do to, a certain area or a town?
So let me try to answer that a little bit. So there isn't what you're looking for available. There is a study that was done by the U.S. Geological Survey, the hydrology of the Ossipee Aquifer by Moore and Medali. And as part of that, they did a computer modeling of the stratified drift portion of the main central part of the aquifer in the West Ossipee area. And in that, they gave a analysis of how much water was available versus how much was being used at that time. And they looked at Pine Tree Power as a major water user and other users in the area. So you could go back and look at that, but there isn't really anything on the scale of what you're talking about.
I mean, you know, what we teach when we do the Get Wet program in the school, we talk about how, you know, it's an easily recharged aquifer, but if we're in a drought and we're not recharging it, then is there a point at which you can't support more development because you just don't have the water resources? And especially when you're going to go through a, you know, when you're in the middle of a drought.
Yeah, so that you could maybe put something together. Of course, there's been lots of studies that have been done in the past about looking at stratified drift aquifers and development on the aquifers, because the aquifers themselves are ideal places for developers. They're flat, they're composed of sand and gravel that perks really well for your septic system. There's water available there. But of course, as people build on it, then it affects both water quality and water quantity.
Right.
And there are many places that have seen their aquifers used up by just building houses on them. So, you know, maybe we could put something together along those lines. In terms of the water use in the stratified drift aquifers, they tend to be very resilient to drought. In fact, our stratified drift aquifers probably don't get any recharge during the summer anyway. There's enough evapotranspiration by the vegetation that it uses up all the available water. Recharge mainly occurs in the fall, some in the spring, depending on what the water table, where the water table is. But you can fill the aquifers and then you can't put anything more in them. And I think you mentioned that that might be something that we want to consider. The other thing to consider, and maybe this is something about natural resources and how you might think about how towns are using their natural resources, and that is sand and gravel mining, because those mines for sand and gravel are removing the aquifer, and they have a lot of impact. So yeah, that's another factor you might want to consider.
Because there is right now, there's down by Duncan Lake, there's, well, most of the concern there is the trucks going over there. They want to start another sand and gravel mine down there when there's already one there.
Well, sand and gravel as a natural resource, as a value, has, you know, it's more valuable than owning a gold mine. It has a lot of value and there's a lot of demand for it. So, you know, there's always going to be that mining is always going to be occurring. And I think you want to think about where it's occurring and what you can do to minimize the impact of it. Yeah.
Thank you.
So just a question, a follow-up question on the gravel and sand mining, Bob. Would that be covered under, would you know this actually, and maybe somebody else on the meeting would know, would it be covered under an ordinance about commercial excavation?
There are mining regulations that are constantly changing. I'm not up to date on what they are, but there are regulations concerning mining and how close they can mine to the water table and things like that. I think there are state rules and there may be also town ordinances as well.
One thing I would like to share too with folks on the meeting is that we have this big binder here at Green Mountain, which is a compilation of all the different natural resource ordinances that towns in our watershed have in place. And that is one of the ones that most of the towns at the time of this binder being created had a commercial excavation ordinance. In fact, I think Effingham was the only one that didn't have one in place.
No,
but it also has.
Excuse me, Effingham does have excavation regulations.
Okay.
And
so
many
that's one thing. Go ahead.
Towns do also. It tends to vary
Yeah.
by town.
So that is one of the things that I think could be updated for folks to have as a resource in the future, because this was last done, I think, in 2006, so it's been quite a while. But yes, it does need updating. But there are other ordinances in here for natural resources, like soil erosion, tree removal, steep slopes, septic systems, wetlands, lighting, floodplain management, viewshed protection, let's see, source water protection plans. And I hear also Freedom is working on a stormwater ordinance at this moment. I don't know if Anne wants to talk about that a little bit.
Yes, we've just finished updating our master plan, and we had two major directions for moving Freedom and our zoning ordinance forward. And one of them is to protect the natural resources. Freedom has a very large part of its tax base in the shorefront district. Probably about 2/3 of our retail residential housing is in the shorefront district. So it's a very important part of our tax base, and people are very interested in maintaining the water for both enjoyment, environmental reasons, as well as the financial impact. Paul Eli, who's the head of the Conservation Commission, and I worked on a stormwater management plan, because the only way we currently can control any stormwater is when something comes to the planning board with site plan or subdivision. And our master plan had a recommendation that we find a way to put it into our ordinance so we could be sure that any development, whether it, even if it weren't a major site plan or subdivision, would be part of our ordinance. So we are requiring that any piece of property that abuts any of the streams, they're covered. Obviously, all the shorefront districts are covered by the regulations from the state, but we are requiring that anyone who is developing, who is abutting a stream that might have an impact on the water quality of the stream because of their construction, will have to go through a process so they're sure that they don't cause any erosion, stormwater, bringing sand, rocks, whatever, into the water body. The planning board is very excited about this. Everyone agreed we had to do it. We're having our public hearing about this zoning ordinance change in December. So we'll see if anybody comes. And then obviously in March, we will have this on the ballot. So that's where we're headed.
You have the date set for that, Ann?
The date for?
The public hearing?
It would be December, third Thursday in December, December 17th.
Okay.
Thanks for sharing that, Anne. I think that's exciting news as well. And perhaps other towns that don't have anything like that and have lots of frontage on brooks and rivers and streams can also piggyback on your efforts.
One of the things that we also have done in Freedom is that we have incorporated some of the shorefront regulations from the state into our town ordinance so that we could have the ability to regulate and supervise what happens, not rely on the state to come and take care of any violations. And the townspeople have been very supportive of adding those. We have sort of stuck them all into our zoning ordinance in the special exceptions section of the shorefront district rules, and we are going to move them out and focus more highly on them as we haven't finished this part of the ordinance planning process, but we're going to take all of that stuff out and put it in a standalone section of our ordinance that says shoreland protection. It won't really change anything except make it much more clear to everyone. Again, people have supported these changes very enthusiastically. So that's another thing we're doing. It's not a big change, but we're trying to really push this year, given that we've gotten the master plan supported by the town to say we have to protect our water, that we're going to just take advantage of that moment this March.
Can I ask, I have a quick question for you. With your stormwater ordinance, was that something that you put together yourselves, or did you have assistance from your regional planning commission?
We actually did a search of the Office of Strategic Initiatives survey of towns with stormwater management ordinances, and we looked at, I bet I read a half a dozen or so to find out how to pursue this. So we sort of did it on our own through the OSI survey.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, a question for Dr. Newton. Back to the topic of aquifer studies, and I'm not quite sure of the total terminology, but the interest of understanding the balance between recharge and extraction, and being able to understand what the threat levels might be from drought, coupled with a threat analysis for an aquifer the size of Ossipee. What would such a study cost, and what range would that kind of study be?
Yeah, what a great question. I think one of the things that we have to think about is that there's not just one aquifer in the region we're talking about. There's the big stratified drift aquifer, and it's pretty resilient. And of course, the Moore and Medali study looked at it a little bit. So we have some general ideas about answers to those questions. The other parts of the aquifer, the other aquifers in the area, there's the glacial till aquifer, which is not a very good aquifer. Wells go dry in the glacial till aquifer during dry summers, and also bedrock aquifers. And so those two are much more susceptible. So if you wanted to do a study of the whole area, it depends on the scale that you're trying to do and how quantitative you want to be, how definitive do you want your answers to be. And you can spend a lot of money. You're talking of tens of thousands of dollars probably for a study like that. But maybe what you should think about is to, instead of trying to do the whole thing, is to divide it up into some 2 or 3 smaller scale things and use those as models for the rest of the area. And where you look at each different kind of terrain and geologic situation and how the groundwater is in that part of the system. It requires knowledge of the water levels in wells, and we don't have any other than, Tara, maybe you know what the status of the USGS wells that we're observing is, but the money available for doing monitoring has been cut back tremendously. So there's not very much groundwater modeling occurring within this watershed at the current time. So, you know, what we would ideally want is some monitoring wells in different situations, and we would, you know, measure water levels. And the way we do it now is we measure water levels every few minutes, and you know, it's very easy to do, and those aren't, you know, those devices individually cost, you know, $600 or $700. They're not very expensive to start monitoring wells over time, and that's helpful. And then there are other things you can do looking at the chemistry and even the isotopic signature of the water to tell you something about where the water is coming from and how uniform it might be over time.
Now, a related question, if I may I do that, Tara? May I ask a follow-up?
Of course, of course.
Yeah, thanks. As Tara and Matt know, the Saco Headwaters Alliance is more focused on the Saco Stratified Drift Aquifer, and we feel like we're cousins of Green Mountain Conservation Group. We have a similar mission. And we're kind of interested in the watershed in totality because of the ecosystem connectivity of the various waterways. So if money were no object, it would be wonderful to be able to understand these questions for not only the various Ossipee aquifers you just described, but in addition, the Saco Stratified Aquifer, and to add another level of dreaming kind of dream work to it. There's the Wardsbrook Aquifer, which sits on the main side, which is also connected because they're all part of the Ossipee. Actually, of course, is confluent, flows into the Saco. My question really is from an ecological point of view, not the financial this time. What would be the ecological benefit? What would be the benefit to us who are concerned about the future water quantity and quality in this beautiful watershed when looked at on a grand scale? What's the benefit of understanding these dynamics in all three of these aquifers?
Well, I think that you know, you've raised a really important point, and you know, the Saco watershed's a little bit different than the Ossipee watershed because you have a deeper valley, and its geologic history is a little bit different. There were lakes. There were a lot of lakes in that valley, and so there are clays, and so there's confined aquifers, recharge up on the sides. It's hydrologically a little bit different than the main part of the Ossipee aquifer, but you know, the idea is that you look at these things in terms of their settings, and you do each setting. And there's been lots of work done like this. So I would say that the first thing you should do is do a literature review and look at what has been done already. And the key things that you need to know about your watershed to be able to do the interpretations is you need to know about the surficial geology. That's the unconsolidated sediment sitting on top of the bedrock. And like the state of Maine has a very rigorous program over many years of doing that kind of work. And they've had some hydrogeologists on their staff, and they've developed quite a bit of the information that's needed to evaluate the Saco watershed. And they have a lot of the background information on the Maine side. New Hampshire's a little late to that business. It's not nearly as well funded as Maine. There is a program to map the quadrangles, the individual maps in New Hampshire, but it's a much smaller scale, and there's not too much that's been done. The old Wolfboro quadrangle, the 15-minute Wolfboro quadrangle has been done. I did the old 15-minute Ossipee Lake quadrangle was done, but both of those were done a long time ago. And we've learned a lot since then. So that kind of work has to get done. And then if you have that work done, then you can do a lot of the interpretation based on what's been done in other kinds of studies to know what the vulnerabilities are in your watershed. So one of the things that maybe we should be doing is talking to the state geologists in both Maine and New Hampshire and seeing what they are doing. Now I know I'm working with I've done work with both of them, and I'm doing stuff right now in New Hampshire, working with the people who are doing the actual mapping, and there's stuff being done in the Tamworth area. Right now, maps are being prepared, and these will help in answering those questions that I think you most want to ask is how much water do we have? How vulnerable is it to drought? Where is development? Where should we manage our developments? We don't want to put big developments on our stratified drift aquifers. In Massachusetts, where I am right now, the towns buy land to protect the aquifers. And they buy lots of land just to protect the aquifers, because we'll run out of water if we don't do that. Housing developments will ultimately decrease the quantity and the quality of the water. So if you allow development on the aquifers, that's what's going to happen. So you want to always try to protect those principal recharge areas. To identify what those areas are, you need to have the basic geologic data to do it. So I think there's a lot maybe we could do to lobby to try to get some of that work, make sure it's being done here, and sort of also say the kinds of things that we're interested in seeing. Tara, maybe we should invite the state geologist to a meeting.
That's what I was just going to ask you. Do you have some contacts we can?
Yes, I can talk to him about that.
Okay.
I think I'm running a geologic field conference in the area in June, and he's helping me, and so I meet with him fairly regularly. I'll mention it.
Right. And as far as those old USGS wells go, I think there were only a handful that were still viable for monitoring.
Yeah, I
and
think,
course,
yeah.
Then we lost our Kemmerer sampler in Danforth Bay. So it's at the bottom of Danforth Bay, and we need to retrieve that for that purpose too.
But maybe that's something else we want to do. Maybe that's something for Green Mountain to think of. It's not. Yep. It is not a very expensive program. It requires us finding the appropriate wells to do it, and maybe doing some development of those wells and putting in some level loggers that will monitor the level for us, and we can look to see when does recharge occur. How much lower is the water this year versus last year? And once we start seeing those relationships, we'll have a much better idea of the kind of threats the drought might cause us.
Did you have one in the Huckins well for a while?
I did. In fact, it's still there, although I haven't downloaded it in, I'm embarrassed to say, a couple years.
Okay.
But it's still
that's something.
So that well was not responding very well, so I kind of thought it wasn't worth my time. I wasn't sure it was going to give me good results. It needed to be processed a little bit to clean it out.
I have a quick question. Who is the current state geologist? I think Rick Coleman retired. Am I right, or is he still?
No, Rich Coleman is currently the state geologist.
So okay, I thought he was retiring, but I guess he didn't. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Dr. Newton.
Bob is fine. If I hear Tara say Dr. Newton again, I'm gonna.
Okay, Bob.
Old habits die hard. So Tom, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to share that, gathering this groundwater data and information was one of the recommendations from your new report that Shaw just put out. And I wanted to give you the floor for a moment to share this great report
well, thank you,
that
Tara.
just came out.
Well, we just had completed by FB Environmental a study of data monitoring across the watershed of what we call the Saco, which we're speaking broadly, so it's really the Saco and Ossipee watersheds because they are confluent with one another. So it's 1,200 square miles. It's a huge area, comprises all the towns on this call, as well as the towns around, as well as the towns that are on the main side over the Wardsbrook Aquifer, like Brownfield and Freiburg and so on. And the purpose of the study was to provide a tool to help us develop a set of metrics, if you will, for a vision of a resilient watershed in the future. How are we going to know where we're going unless we can be a bit more specific about what our targets are on water quality and water quantity? So this study evaluated what kind of data we have, what kind of data systems we've got that collect data, and where are the gaps. And clearly one of the gaps is in the groundwater realm. And for example, one of our board members is the superintendent of the North Conway Water Precinct, and he's got great responsibilities for maintaining the quality of the Saco stratified drift aquifer, but he doesn't have a lot of tools at his disposal because he's also got a wastewater treatment plant. So his major source of intervention is really to try to expand the wastewater treatment service to the communities in that part of the world. And so the groundwater deficiency is also complicated by the fact that it's controversial, of course, because Poland Springs is extracting water from the Wardsbrook Aquifer, and that's a long-standing controversy that has been to the courts on multiple occasions. And as we know, Nestle's Poland Springs has won in the Supreme Court of Maine. And the studies that have been conducted on the Wardsbrook Aquifer have been done by contractors who have been hired by Poland Springs. So that leads some questions in the minds of the public as to the authenticity. And then there are towns such as Brownfield who have made huge progress in putting in their own groundwater ordinances to protect themselves from massive extractions in their own zones. So our study was really a foundational piece of work that's going to be a work in progress to fill in the gaps. And it really revolves around the questions that you were mentioning earlier, which is, and that were kicked off by, I think, Anne in one of the original questions, which is, what are the threats from drought? What are the threats from extraction? How can we quantify this? How can we know what's going on instead of having kind of a black box of where our water comes from? So this was, we're a new organization. We only became incorporated in 2019. So this also was of symbolic value for us that we were able to produce a report that hopefully will be a useful tool, and we will develop and grow it over time. So thanks, Tara, for the opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, and Tom, I'll share the link to that report when we send out the minutes to everyone.
Oh, that's great. Appreciate that, Tara.
So I just wanted to throw it out there. Amanda and I had been discussing a date and time for the Natural Resource Planning Workshop coming up in January. And I was wondering if folks off the top of their head know if there are any town meetings or board meetings on a Monday evening, January 25th at around 5 p.m. And if that would be a good date.
That would be the fourth, that's the fourth week of the month. That helps in thinking through the cycles.
If you know of any conflicts, feel free to let us know. That's the date we're looking at anyway at this point in time. It sounds like from what we understand, a lot of boards don't meet on Monday night. Okay, folks can get back to me about that too.
And mostly, it's for some reason thinking mostly select boards in other towns that have meetings on Monday nights. That's the most common Monday night meeting. if that's not, doesn't affect you, then that's not an issue.
And I just wanted to open it up to any other issues that folks are, you know, dealing with in their towns related to water quality. If you have anything that this committee could be looking at, or needs, you know, you need to pick the brains of anyone here tonight about, feel free to share any of those issues at this time.
Well, I could add another one, Tara, that is important on the agenda that we've got at SHA, as we call ourselves. And that has to do with stream crossing infrastructure. And of course, Green Mountain Conservation Group has done an awesome job of assessing. I think we learned from you, Matt, that 200 stream crossings have already been assessed in 2019, if I got that right. Across how many towns, Tara?
So this past summer, we worked in 3 towns, and I think it's about 200. I have to still update the database a little bit with some sites that weren't in the original list and we found in the field. But yeah, around 200 in the towns of Effingham, Freedom, and Ossipee.
Well, that's an awesome piece of work, and we're also trying to play a support role. New Hampshire Fish and Game is in the beginning stages of assessing all of the stream crossings in what might be called the east-west middle section between the south and the north of the Saco headwaters lines, which cuts right through the Saco Stratified Aquifer and the towns of Bartlett and Conway and so on. And then the northern part, which is Hart's Location and also Bartlett, which is really being covered by North Country Council. And the part that we're interested in, hopefully, and this is another one of these maybe overly, hopefully not, ambitious ideas of, if we think forward to a resilient watershed in the future, and considering the increased incidence of flooding due to severe storms, and as we've learned from FEMA, the Northeast has experienced a 70% increase of severity and frequency of storms over the last 50, 60 years, the highest rate of increase of any place in the country. We know that the damage from floods is considerable. We know that from the experts at Fish and Game and other organizations like Green Mountain Conservation Group, that many of these, if not the majority of these, we're told, of these stream crossing culverts in particular, are vulnerable to not sustaining the next floods. So if we're really thinking about resilience for the future, this continuing increase of frequency and severity of flooding represents a major threat. And the solution would be an incredibly expensive refitting and modernizing of this entire infrastructure. So we're in the early stages of exploring some innovative funding mechanisms that might be able to generate the funds, working on the notion of municipal bonds, which are very difficult to pass, of course, but working with communities of impact investors who might be interested. It's an ambitious goal. It's a long-term process, but Tara kindly and Matt kindly have joined us with all of their expertise and experience in this, with the other organizations like Fish and Game and North Country Council. And we're trying to build toward not just an assessment, but a restoration and modernization program if we're really going to achieve resilience for the longer term.
Yeah, and I have to say, Tom, it's been a great partnership so far. And thank you for Shaw for laying out the framework and the opportunity to collaborate with Fish and Game on this, and to our wonderful volunteers and Karen, you and Vic, amazing job this summer. And Trent and EB will be helping with this project next year in the towns of Tamworth, Sandwich, and Madison. We're coming towards the end of our meeting at this point, and I just wanted to give folks an opportunity if you had any other drinking water concerns or issues in your towns, something that you think might be a regional issue or something that you might want this committee to look at. So feel free to share those now.
Sarah, I have a question. I don't know whether this is the right place to ask it, or of the people that are here that are so knowledgeable, but being here on Ossipee Lake, and you know, we have a water lake drawback every fall in October, early October, and the recent heavy rains that we had before this, you could walk out perhaps 200 yards and it was just sand. And just today, the watershed has brought down all of that water right back to where it is in the summertime. It's not quite as deep, but it's right up to the shoreline. And I wonder if that is monitored by the people who control the dam in Concord. I know, you know, a lot of work was done to rebuild the dam so that they can monitor it from that distance. Does anyone know about, and the reason I do it, I should add, if those don't know, for those that don't know, in the spring, we get the snow melt, excuse me, and run down from the shed and all of these other mountains, Green Mountain behind us, and the Ossipees, of course. And when the winds push 3 miles of ice towards the shoreline, it devastates properties. And so I'm wondering whether they plan to draw the water back again now that we've had so much rain, or just what might happen as a result. I don't know if anyone knows that, the answer to that.
Is Susan Marks still at the meeting? Maybe she knows Ossipee Lake Alliance.
Hi, yes, sorry, I am.
Oh, there you are.
Hi. Yes, Bibi, for sure. I mean, the water will return to the winter level. It, you know, as we, you know, it temporarily comes in and then it will slowly start going down. And I know they were down at the dam today, actually dealing with the water that came in, because they're still working down there. And but yeah, it definitely will not stay up. It's it will go back down to slowly. I mean, I think even after the last rainstorm, it was up, but it wasn't as far up as any normal levels. It was still at a winter drawdown level.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the dam is wide open, so they'll just be letting it out.
Thank you, Susan. I think back to our first spring here. My husband and I were teaching in Massachusetts and came up on the weekend, walked around to the lakeside and went, what? It looked as though about 5 huge trucks had dumped blocks of ice all along the backyard here that faces the lake. It's incredible how much ice there is in 3 miles. And the wind tends to push it in this direction. And so it's a scary thing come spring.
Right.
So thank you. It's good to know that that's being.
And hopefully with the new dam too, it's got to be controlled.
Right. I didn't know if there was a panic button that we could push, or who to call, or before we're fortunately, when we rebuilt, we had to move back 40 feet. Now it's 50. So I don't worry about the house disappearing under the ice, but the shore fronts and the stone walls and things get really, really heavily damaged if the ice isn't, you know, the lake isn't controlled. So thank you. That's reassuring.
Okay.
I might add a thing.
Go ahead, Bob.
The problem is that the dams can only release a certain amount of water.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a big event like this, more water comes in than can be released by the dam.
Right.
The lake level comes up. The other thing I would say about you're talking about the damage done, if you go around any of these lakes where there hasn't been a lot of buildings along the edges of them, you'll see what we call ice ramparts, and that there are ridges that were created all the time before humans were here from that very process. So they're very they're very diagnostic of lake levels.
Mhm, mhm. Thank you, Bob.
Okay, so we have about a minute here, and I just wanted to do one more screen share with everyone just to show you a
Tara,
tool that.
Tara, I think Mark had something to say.
Well, I don't
Go ahead.
want to be blamed for going over the time frame, but I did have a quick question for the group. I got an interesting call today. It wasn't that interesting, from a neighbor who knows I'm interested in water quality, and I had offered him a DES kit, to test his well water. He said, "Mark, why should I?" He said, "I was in Meredith today and I noticed this big sign that said free water testing." I'm sure it was outside a water filtration company. And he said, "Why should I pay DES $85 for standard analysis when I can get a free water test?" And my first thought was, and you do see advertising in the newspapers for free water testing, that these companies have some self-interest in selling filtration, home filtration equipment. But I'm wondering if anyone's gone through these companies and had free testing. I wonder if they're doing complete analysis, or perhaps only looking at some of the potential contaminants that they can handle. And I haven't responded to this neighbor yet, and I was looking for advice.
I would
Bob, you want to go ahead?
I would strongly suspect that they analyze just one or two constituents, and then say, well, this is from that, and what you really have to worry about all these other things, and so we'll do those for you, but it'll cost you X number of dollars.
Yeah, so I could do a little survey and find out what they're testing for and what the actual charge happens to be, and get back to the group if you're interested.
Yeah, and also I was going to mention, Mark, that DES has a list of labs across the state that are certified, and that might be something to direct people to as well when they're looking for a lab to test their water.
Okay.
Mark, I fell for that and had my water tested by a filtration company, not knowing that they were a filtration company. But they tested for things like pH, nitrates, hardness, some of the easier parameters, conductivity, not what I would be most concerned with, such as maybe radon. They did test for heavy metals, but not specifically. So I didn't know if there was arsenic or something. Those tests are more expensive and require lab, but it was sort of on-the-spot testing.
Well, maybe.
Oh, you froze. Oh dear.
Maybe there's an opportunity here. Thank you.
Mark, I don't know if that came through for others, but it didn't come through for me. Can you repeat what you just said?
Right, yeah, thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm just saying that perhaps there's an opportunity for us to do some public awareness work to let people know what the downsides are for getting these free tests versus a full analysis from the state lab. That might be, people might really appreciate knowing that, and some type of a communication.
Yeah, and I think what we're doing right now by just promoting the DES kits and having, a wonderful person like yourself volunteer to drive down there quarterly to offer, free shipping for people for their samples is a great thing to be promoting too. So we can just keep promoting that. I think that would be awesome.
I sense a buttering up here. But I do plan on going to Concord on a quarterly basis, so keep that in mind.
I think that's wonderful. I just wanted to quickly share one more thing with this group, just to show you where this lives so that you can maybe review this amongst yourselves or with your town boards, and maybe as a jumping off point for our natural resource planning meeting. This is a report card that we did years ago comparing natural resource protection across the Ossipee watershed towns. I think it was a useful tool for everyone to see on one page the level of protection that towns offered various natural resources. I'm going to attempt to share this quickly. There it is. Okay, so this is what it looks like. And the towns are listed across the top. And then the ordinance or plan is listed on the left, in the left-hand column. This is available on our website if you go to natural resource planning. You can find a lot of great resources, including the Ossipee Watershed Natural Resource Guide, which has chapters on all of these different natural resources and more in-depth information and recommendations. But this was a great tool, I think, to see visually in one page where towns were at. And of course, it needs updating as we have new ordinances that have been adopted since then. But it might be an interesting point, conversation starter for your town boards when you're looking at natural resource protection these days. So again, this lives on our website. If you go to the tab that says Natural Resource Planning under Advocacy, you will find this natural resource matrix and a number of different resources that might be helpful.
Oh, thank you, Tara.
Sure.
Yeah, that's great.
So on that note, I will put links also in our minutes that we send out. Unless anyone has anything else to add, stay tuned for more details on the upcoming natural resource planning workshop and some follow-up to some of the things we discussed in the meeting. And if you have further comments or questions, feel free to reach out. As always, education@gmcg.org is my email.
Thank you, Tara.
All right, thank you everybody for coming
Thank you
tonight.
very much.
Thanks, Tara.
Thank you.
All right.
Good
Thanks,
night.
everyone. Yeah.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
I like your tree, Dana.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
The first one I've seen. I'm waiting until Christmas Eve. Get them cheap then.
Oh, there's one.
It's the biggest tree we've ever gotten. It was 10 feet tall.
Ooh.
Wow.
We were able to squeeze it in through the door.
Hopefully backwards.
Yeah. So, well, have a good holiday if I don't see you before then.
Thank you. You too.
You as well.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.